In sports, the scoreboard doesn't tell the full story, but Netflix does. Stories about dads who happen to be world-class quarterbacks and a battle for the heart, soul, and direction of the multi-billion-dollar business of F1. Whether you're a diehard fan or you're brand new, Netflix has the stories for every type of fan. You can watch these incredible sports stories like Quarterback, F1 Drive to Survive, Untold, and many more now on Netflix.
This episode is brought to you by Columbia Sportswear. It's snowing again, and that wind chill is killer. But you're not worried about that because you shop the Omni Heat Infinity Collection. It's warmth perfected with tiny gold dots that reflect your body heat inside and protect you from the cold outside. No snow or chilly temps can stop you now. Go out anyway. Shop the Omni Heat Infinity Collection now at Columbia.com/infinity.
Apple Card is the credit card created by Apple. You earn 3% daily cash back up front when you use it to buy a new iPhone 15, AirPods, or any products at Apple. And you can automatically grow your daily cash at 4.15% annual percentage yield when you open a high-yield savings account. Apply for Apple Card in the Wallet app on iPhone. Apple Card subject to credit approval. Savings is available to Apple Card owners subject to eligibility. Savings accounts by Goldman Sachs Bank USA, member FDIC. Terms apply.
Serie A Chronicles is a Media Chronicles production.
Hello and welcome to another episode of this Serie A Chronicles podcast. And it was the penultimate round of games, so everyone was sitting there thinking, oh my God, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? Because there were, of course, some big matches. But before we get into it, let me bring on Nikki Bandini, who's having a little problem with your wonderful dog. She keeps saying to me, I don't know what's going on. I've never seen anything like this. And I'm super scared to leave him. And meanwhile, I'm just waiting, thinking, wait, what am I supposed to do? Like, do we wait and check whether she should take him to the vet? What's going on with Ross?
It's been a bit chaotic, hasn't it? I'm sorry. We've already sort of had a slightly sort of mix-up schedule this week for other reasons. And then I was just getting sat down to record, and suddenly he was like gulping very furiously, like really gulping a lot and desperate to go outside. I didn't know what was up. And sometimes he's just desperate to go outside so he can bark at the cat. But I realized the gulping wasn't normal. So I let him out. And he was eating grass really furiously, which he does sometimes when he wants to be sick. And anyway, I had to spend some time with him. He's just been sick. I think he's all right. Obviously, I'm keeping an eye on him, and we'll keep an eye on him in case anything else develops. But I think he's probably just eaten something in the park that he shouldn't have, because he does that sometimes. Oh, and there he is. Now he's barking. He's clearly feeling fine.
Oh, that's good. Okay. I was thinking to myself the other day, you really do have to be very unselfish to have like dogs and kids. And I think that's kind of why I don't have anything, because I don't know how to do that.
It does require a certain amount of disruption to your life to have a dog. And I don't have kids either, Mina. And I do think to myself sometimes, I literally don't understand how people manage to arrange their lives, because it's hard enough with a dog. Producer Simon looking wistful to see the camera.
Yeah, of course, with all his kids. Right. Big matches yesterday. We were all thinking to ourselves, like, obviously, I think the harder match would be Milan at home against Atalanta. I think the last time that Milan actually managed to defeat Atalanta at home in San Siro was in 2014, right? So we're talking about 8 years ago. And it's tough when you imagine the fact that, there's obviously like a perfect poetry in this, in the sense that when this project started, they lost 5-0 to Atalanta. Stefano Pioli had just come in, and that's when they decided to bring in Simon Kjaer and, of course, Zlatan Ibrahimovic to try to offer reference points and these more experienced players to this young group of players that they were trying to raise on a mental level, not just on a technical and physical level. And then it comes full circle. They defeat Atalanta 2-0 in an extraordinary performance, especially from said youngsters and in Rafael Leao, and what was the most beautiful goal by Theo Hernandez. And I don't know who to give the credit to in this match, to be honest with you, because it is one thing that I'm always on about constantly in all my podcasts when I do radio or anything like that is just the brilliance of Ancelotti a lot in this season. And the reason why I think he's so brilliant is because how he tactically adjusts the team. And you could tell that Atalanta were better in the first half. But the substitution of Junior Macias and just little things that he moves positioning of, just unleashed Theo Hernandez, just that perfect assist for Rafael Vallejo. He is so tactically perfect and shifting and changing and adjusting. And I just think, like, if Stefano Pioli finally wins this trophy, and he's been around the block for a while, like, how glorious would be, because this is not, of course it's his coaching, of course it's his development, but also it's his technical know-how that is just, I feel like always doesn't get recognized as much as how he is capable of, like, creating this team harmony.
Yeah, I think it's, sometimes I look at how things have played out in a Serie A season. I think, the old cliche, you couldn't script this, which of course you could. You could write something even more outrageous, but some of it really is a lot, isn't it? I think this run-in for Milan, where they go up against Lazio, Simone Inzaghi's old team, and they beat them with that goal in injury time. Then they go up against Fatal Verona. They go up against the team that's always their boogie team at the end of the season, and they beat them. And then next is Atalanta, who, as you said, they got thumped by 5-0. They hadn't won at home to Atalanta in 8 years. And he just said that, but I really want to reinforce that. Like, it's 8 years since Milan have beaten Atalanta at home. So, like, another really sort of ominous fixture with this history to it that should weigh on them, and just scroll on past it and then do it with Theo Hernandez scoring this goal that is, like, I mean, it's not identical, but it's about as close as you can get in real terms to being a carbon copy of the famous George Weah goal, like the George Weah coast goal that everyone talks about.
Do you really think so, by the way? Yeah, but when you look at that goal.
Yes.
No, but when you look at
Weah's goal's
George Weah's
better.
goal.
I like Weah's goal.
Yeah,
better.
I mean,
Weah's
it's much better, right? And also, he had, like, people trying to stop him, whereas I felt like most of the time Atalanta didn't really do anything until the end. And we're like, okay, maybe we should stop this guy. Do you know what I mean? Whereas Weah had to overcome, like, 3, There was also a bit of good luck with that at the time. And he was really fast. I mean, his pace is what made the difference. But you didn't feel with Theo it was his pace as much. It was like he just had a lot. Like, Atalanta just allowed him to go.
I think you're being a little unfair. I thought, certainly Koopmeiners tries to stop him and just isn't fast enough. Like, Koopmeiners runs after him and can't. Then Jim City comes herring across full sort of road.
Yes, the end they do decide. Yes,
the problem is
true.
that Darun's coming from the opposite direction. And that's the best bit of it from Hernandez, I think, is he sort of leads them into each other. He leads them sort of straight into each other. Like, that's why I came up with Roadrunner came into my head, because it was like a cartoon. They're just running face into each other. Palomino, I don't know what he's doing. He looks like he's genuinely just, like, in awe of what's happening in front of him. He's like, oh my God.
Wow.
Like, I'm watching history
guy.
right now. Like, yeah, like it sort of felt like to me. Whereas, no, you're right. Weah had more to do. Weah had to beat more players on the way to doing it. But I mean, it's a corner of your own penalty box all the way up to the end of the pitch.
Yeah.
The shot across goal at the end as well is really similar. Like, there's so much in parallel in it. And yeah, I just think it's such a sort of, it's just, there's so many points in this sort of end of season running that you think of have been like picture perfect, from Tonali at Lazio to this goal. And yes, in the end, I think absolutely I agree with you that Pioli is the man who we should all be praising. And he was saying, how touched he was at the end of the game, because there were fans singing that song, Pioli's on Fire.
I know!
Which, it's incredible video of the... Oh,
Desire is the original song, and they've just basically called it Pioli on Fire. So it's free from desire, da da da. So it's like Pioli's on fire, and he just loves it. He loves it.
I love all of it, because also, like, as a kid who went to Italy on hot summer holidays when I was younger, like, those were the sort of the sort of disco night tunes that they would play. Like we used to go on this like summer camp in Italy, and like disco night, those are the sorts of tunes they would play. And like sometimes, say this with love, but sometimes Italy does feel like it's stuck in a time warp. Like it hasn't moved forward in certain things culturally. And the fact that that song is still played in stadiums, like you do think to yourself, but there's something amazing about it. And I think Pioli, like he's so obviously genuinely touched by it. But this whole team, Mina, like I think that's one of the reasons why it's sort of, it feels like such a feel-good story. I'm sure not to Juventus fans, not to Inter fans, not to their rivals, but you've got all these young players who are clearly loving the moment. You've got Pioli, who really like, I think he feels like he's this big underdog. I think he really feels like I'm not supposed to be here, but now I am. And look at this, like we're doing it. And then you've got Zlatan, who knows he is supposed to be there and winning things, but is so into this moment that he literally thumped the team bus window so hard. And if you've seen the video, he thumps the front window of the team bus when they're arriving so hard during the fans, it cracks. Which I can't imagine how hard you have to hit a bus window with your hand to crack it.
It is the great Zlatan.
It's Zlatan, exactly, Zlatan things. It's like those old Chuck Norris memes. The moment that Milan are having is so extraordinary. But, you know, to bring it back to Pioli, the video that he showed his players was Kobe Bryant when the Lakers were 2-0 up in a playoff series saying, this series isn't done. And it's not done. They still need one more point.
You know what I find so remarkable as well about this is that, like, it's just one of those seasons in which there's been 16 different goal scorers in Serie A alone for Milan. And the fact is that Leao is their top scorer with 11 goals. When you think that Lautaro Martinez has scored 10 just from March, So, I mean, and 21 overall. But, I mean, we've got one guy who scored, 11 over a season, and wow, what a great development for him. But also there really isn't a guy that you can point out and say, that's the reason Milan's there. Does that make sense? There isn't this totally it's wonderful that you don't know who's going to come up tops in the game. Whether it's going to Sandro Tonali is going to have the game of his life, whether Theo Hernandez is going to deliver the brilliance that he managed to deliver on this occasion, whether it's Giroud understanding the moments of the game and using his experience to his benefit, or Rafael Leao. It's just, you don't know where it's going to where the goal's going to come from. And I think that's what's so lovely about it. And when you look at the goal scorers, I mean, there's Romagnoli in there, there's Daniele Maldini in there. So it really is like a remarkable achievement. But also more than anything is if you look at the sort of like the heat map and how the players were sort of stacked during the game, obviously most teams fill the area in the middle, right? Sort of, around their halfway line. And it's more horizontal density. But when you looked at Milan against Atalanta, it was almost two stacked vertical lines of 4 rather than horizontal lines. It was just 2 lines of 4, like stacked. And then Theo and Rafael just really outside it, like on their far, far left. And it's amazing because it's just that ability to try to target all the gaps that Atalanta might leave in between. And that's what I think is so clever about them, is the fact that they are so flexible on a tactical level, that there isn't a star or a go-to movement. It is just, we constantly adapt to the opponent, neutralize their deficiencies and neutralize their strengths, and make sure that our strengths are also put on show at the same time. And I just think that's remarkable coaching. So more than anything, I want them to win this because it's a good project that deserves a trophy at the end of it. It's a good management. It's a good sporting director. Just seeing them all like congregate and scream and rejoice when that first goal went in. It's amazing what they've gone through and how they managed to go to win.
Yeah, I mean, yes, let's say the bit that will prod the Allegri haters. Like it's Allegri ball, right? Like it's Allegri ball is keep it tight and then trust your difference makers to make a difference. And I mean, I think it's more complicated than that, but there is something in that idea, right? Because look, the first strength of this Milan team, in my opinion, is the one that you can see from the fact they've had 17 clean sheets this season and they've had 11 just since the start of 2022. So they've got better in that regard. They don't concede goals. They really don't concede goals very often. This whole game, the only chance I really remember from Atalanta, well, Muriel had like a shot that stung the palms of Maignan, but it was nothing that you'd expect a keeper to let past them. And then Duvan Zapata had one header from a corner, and that was it. This is a team who are the 4th highest scorers in Serie A this season. So that's the first strength of this team, which is Tomori, Kalulu, Calabria, and to some extent Theo Hernandez, and then Maignan in goal when they're all there is a really solid platform. Pioli was a defender himself.
Yeah, imagine not needing Cagliari as well.
Right.
Imagine that absence being one you don't even remember.
Kalulu's really come on like a really big way very quickly, and that's been really impressive as well. When we talk about Tomori a lot, but I think Kalulu's got good. Although having said that, he absolutely does commit a foul in the build-up to their first goal against Atalanta, and that goal should have not stood, just to be clear and fair about that. I thought it was 100% a foul.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. You don't think it should have stood, the first goal?
No, I think it should be a free kick to Atalanta on the edge of the Milan box, because he makes the challenge from behind and gets away with it on Pessina.
I agree.
Whether or not VAR should intervene is a different question, because then you get into like the technicalities of like how VAR is supposed to operate, but it's a foul. But I think, yeah, you sort of start with that premise of like, we're just not going to concede goals very often. And then, as you mentioned, there is no one player who scores the goals, but there's just enough players who can do that for you that you're going to win more often than not. Like you've got Rafael Leao, who you just mentioned about the vertical lines, Mina. Like in the end, I felt like what Atalanta did in this game very well, especially at the beginning, was pack the midfield, make it hard for Milan to go through it. So in the end, Milan just bypassed it, right? Just send the ball over the top for Leao to get onto, and it worked. And then once that had happened, things opened up, and then Teo can do his wonder goal. But yeah, sometimes it's Leao, sometimes it's Giroud, sometimes it's earlier in the season it was Ibrahimovic, and sometimes it's your left back, Teo Hernandez. But there's enough players in this team that can do that for you that it's worked. And yeah, one more game to go, but last day of the season, Milan controlled their own destiny, and they only need a draw. They don't even need to win against Sassuolo. So anything but a loss on the last day will do it for them.
Except that Sassuolo has managed to defeat all top 3 teams so far this season. So by all means, not an easy fixture to navigate. What makes it so interesting is, of course, if Giorgio Squinzi, who is a former owner of Sassuolo, was alive, he would have cheered on Milan. He would have said to them, throw this game. I know we were integrity and all of that, but I mean, he was such a staunch Milan fan that, for him to know that it would be his team that would be able to decide the fate would be very interesting.
This is a man, just to say on Squinzi, Mina, this is a man, so for people who don't know about him, this is a man who, while owner of Sassuolo, used to have a phone with a Milan cover on it. Like he had a Milan cover on his phone, even as he's the president and owner of Sassuolo. That's the level we're talking about. And
happily in interviews would say, if it's between those two, I want Milan to win. I love that around. That's exactly who I would be, I mean, between him and Maurizio Zamparini, I just feel like you got me solid, like I'm like their love child between the two. So anyway, but what's interesting is also, of course, like Inter, the CEO of Sassuolo is Giovanni Carnevali, and he's Beppe Marotti's best friend. So don't worry, I don't think they're going to throw the game. But of course, regardless of how good Milan are, then there's Inter, right? And they're just not at all giving up this fight. They keep going. People wondered whether or not... I thought this was a little bit random, to be honest with you, because in my head I was like, of course they're going to win against Cagliari. And I was like, well, you never know. Barella, and he has an emotional connection, because is he really going to want to be part of the team that condemns Cagliari to defeat and possibly relegation? This is touchy because they're going to go for it. They're fighting, but it's Inter. Like it's I mean, for me, Inter's still the best squad in the league, still the best team in the league. There's been moments in which they've forgotten that or got too emotional, but they are like a hugely great team. So I know they played 120 minutes in the Coppa Italia, but they still won that. So that sort of almost like gives you the push required. So I found it surprising that anyone would even doubt them in this match. And thankfully, thankfully, depending on who you side with, but 12 shots only in the first half. And yet, remarkably, it was still 1-0. There are moments where you just think they create so much Inter, but don't do sometimes enough to get the most out of it. Hey, still finished with 3 goals, though. Not bad.
Yeah, it was a strange game because they were perhaps in some ways reflected what's been a little bit their Achilles heel this season. They were totally in control of the game. Obviously a much better team than Cagliari. Didn't seem to suffer any of the sort of being away from home and playing against a team that's fighting against relegation. And then at 2-0, they just sort of let Cagliari back into it for no reason at all. I mean, it was a lovely goal from Lykogiannis, but I'm sure I've just murdered that name, Lykogiannis or Lykogiannis, I don't know. But either way, it was just a strange sort of situation to let them back in. But no, I think it speaks really well to Inter and to Inzaghi Because you think about a few seasons ago when Napoli did play against Juventus, and that whole story of, they saw Juventus play ahead of them and beat Inter when they were hoping Juventus would drop points, and the psychological impact that had on the Napoli players. And they went into that Fiorentina game with all the wrong mindset and they got hammered. Inter had to watch Milan win ahead of them. They had to see this wonderful Teo Hernandez goal. They see San Siro, which is their own stadium full of Milan fans cheering as if they've won the title already. And they went out and they did a job still. And I think that Inzaghi said after the game, look, I, as a player, I won a title on the last day when I was behind, which was when he was at Lazio and they leapfrogged Juventus on the last day in 2000. So he's like, I'm not giving this up. Like, we're going to take you all the way to the end of it and see if they do stuff it up. And so I think it's to his credit as a manager, and it's to the credit of that team that they've still got their focus. I think in the end, this is Inter's title that they've blown. I think that Bologna game is unavoidably the thing that's going to weigh on everyone afterwards. But you can only deal with what's ahead of you. You can't deal with what's behind you. And they are finishing the season in the right way. And good for us to watch.
Yeah, definitely for us, because, and you keep everyone on tenterhooks. Apparently the Milan players have stayed behind to try to watch the first half and see if it was something, in which they thought maybe Cagliari can do something. But obviously Inter was so strong, managed already a goal. But it's an interesting one, because there's a lot about this that I find fascinating as somebody who had Antonio Conte as their coach. There was this moment, and when you talk to the players, in which there was a little bit of negativity about the confidence issue. You see, what Conte does so well is build you into being this warrior. And so what happens is that you obviously feel like if you work really hard and you do everything you're supposed to do, then you will win. That's what he sort of guarantees you, right? But what it does sometimes is tell you that if you don't work that hard, then you don't have enough to win. And that can trigger another form of inconsistency and insecurity. I say this because this happened a lot for the Champions League, for example, when he was like, it's between us and Galatasaray for second place, or you have to run harder than Nordjylland. And there was a lot of these issues being discussed back then within the camp, as in the players felt that if they weren't in the optimum fitness condition, it would be a problem. What I find so interesting about Inter this season is that they do make things difficult for themselves, and they have been in situations where you feel like you have enough, just keep going. But it's almost like that is that emotional business where they start getting a little bit scared. And you saw that, for example, like you said, when the goal was scored and all of a sudden they were like, couldn't play out from the back, started to tremble a little bit. And you think that this is something that Inzaghi, I think, tackled that really well, immediately made substitutions 4 minutes later, immediately brought in, Gagliardini. And who else did he bring on at the time?
It was Dumfries who came on with Gagliardini.
Dumfries as well. Yeah. So it's a case of like, let's just keep effort high. Let's keep strength up. Come on, guys. We're good enough for this. Like, don't be scared, And so he's trying to target this, but sometimes it is a case of, with Inter, they don't need to run harder than any other team. They are the best team in Serie A. They can attack you through the wings or through the middle by any way, shape or form, in set pieces or not. They have a top goal scorer right now in Lautaro Martinez, who's fantastic to watch. They have a veteran in Perisic that I think we haven't seen this version of it's almost like the guy ages better than he was when he was a kid. He's just much better now. He's a bit of a Barzagli, but in an attacking position, He's extraordinary to watch. And so I think there has to be something there on a mental level where they can get back to being the side that actually really do believe in themselves and believe that they only need 3 minutes to get as many goals as they need to get. And he said the game that he would like Simone Inzaghi to replay is the first leg against Liverpool. And I totally understand that. But in my head, I'm like, I wish you could also play the second leg, because even though you scored a goal, I still think even when you went a man down, you could have gone in a second. I believe that much in their ability to do that. But I do think this game was made very easy for them in the sense that Agostini decided to play basically a narrow attack. And I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what you do when Perisic is on the field. But sure, buddy, have fun, and at least he tried to correct it afterwards. But I think Inzaghi, you can see also his development over the season on a tactical level, how he's starting to influence the side on psychological level, knowing when to make the substitutions at the right time. So I find that also interesting, because it's nice to see a team sort of grow into their own.
Yeah, I think it was really interesting, that question you just talked about, Mina, where it wasn't just him who got asked. They were obviously asking, the reporters were asking everyone, which game they'd like to have back. And for Lautaro Martinez, it was the Bologna game. He said it like right away, like no question, no doubts. He said it, as if he's resigned to next week already. He said we threw away the title that day. Inzaghi didn't want the Bologna game back. He wanted the Liverpool game back. And I think that's really interesting when you sort of think about their season and like how everyone's going to frame their season and think about it. I'd be curious, Mina, because I think we've sort of talked about this before the cup final. And obviously there's been a cup final since we last recorded. And they won that cup final. And I was wondering how you would grade out Inzaghi. Because I think, seasons are long and we forget things, right? There have been times this season, especially early in the season, where we were kind of picking at him for substitutions. There were games in which, you're saying he got substitutions right here. There's been times when I think even Inter's fans have been a bit sort of frustrated with his substitutions. But I think for me, if it's second place in the league and it's the knockouts of the Champions League and it's winning the Coppa Italia, he's a solid B. Like he's definitely no lower than a B. He might even be a B plus, even with second place, given that you think at the start of the season, Lukaku's gone, Hakimi's gone. Like it's not a disappointment in the grand scheme. Obviously, it's a disappointment in the moment not to win the title, but I feel like overall it's a more positive season than negative season. The problem for me in the bigger picture is that all the reports and everything we're hearing out of Inter is they're going to have to sell again, and I don't know if they can even sustain where they are right now. But I don't think that this first season is negative just because they don't win Serie A. If they don't win Serie A, then we're going to say all this before they win it next week.
Yeah, well, there's still an opportunity. Even if anyone even thinks of criticizing Inzaghi, then they're crazy. Because really, honestly, this is a guy who kept them in competitions until the end and won trophies. I mean, with Conte, I'm sorry, but he had Lukaku, he had Hakimi, he had Eriksen, and he was knocked out from pretty much, he didn't reach the final of the Coppa Italia. He was knocked out early in the group stage of the Champions League. He had Antonio Pintus as his fitness coach, and this guy hasn't, and they played a lot of games. And if you could just take away February from him, then he's had a remarkable season, right? It's just unfortunately February happened and it was too many matches and they couldn't keep up on a mental and physical condition level at least. And I don't think the players in Correa, Sanchez, they're not exactly for me the kind of guys that I would introduce off the bench to try to score the goals that I really need to score. But he's the only team that's defeated Liverpool in Anfield in 2022. He had more points than Conte by December, better defending as well. And this is despite the fact that they're a much more attacking team than anything that we saw under Antonio Conte. There are so many different tactical schemes, and the way that they sort of change is remarkable to watch. What's interesting about Inzaghi, it is, like you said, it is his development, it is his substitutions. And I'm sorry, but they have been somewhat ridiculous at times, especially against Real Madrid. Like, I don't know what he was thinking with half of them, It's almost like it's like he tries to create a challenge in the second half for himself, or he believes in the win too early on. I don't know. But I do also think he's gotten better at managing the game in general. And of course, he is somebody who really believes himself when he reached the final. Like, he's reached 10 finals and won now 8. It's remarkable to consider the fact that he always bets on himself now when it comes to finals. He's so not to be shaken on a psychological level. And that's what I find very interesting. So, and here's the thing that I think is important to note. Conte didn't have the competition that Inzaghi's had this season. He's had a stronger Milan and he's had a stronger Napoli. So for many weeks, we couldn't figure out who was going to be it. Was it going to be Napoli? Was it going to be Milan? Was it going to be Inter? It was constantly back and forth, but you could see Inter being the better team, but the competition was so strong. Whereas I don't feel like it was last season. So, I mean, Atalanta was strong by all means, but not really competition for Inter. And Milan were not where they are today. So I think Inzaghi, honestly, I think he's done an even better job, even if he hasn't won the Scudetto. But that has more to do with Milan being brilliant than I think sometimes Inter. Although February, he should be, I guess, maybe a little bit told off for that. Guys, we want to thank you for always being supportive of the Serie A Chronicles podcast. It's thanks to you that we keep going and that we're able to pay our bills. And we do want to do a quick shout out to new Chronicles Tifosi patrons. Thank you so much for coming on board to listen to our various monologues and I'll just say something. I recorded a 30-minute mini episode. I think it was longer than the actual pod. That I was so embarrassed that I deleted it. But yes, thank you for coming on board to listen to all our extra content and for supporting the podcast. Just a few names to read out today. It's Gilbert Lorque. Thank you so much. Adan Abdullah. Thank you so much. And Oliver Witten. Thank you guys for joining on board, and we hope you enjoy it.
And thank you as well to Andrew H. for a generous donation via Ko-fi. If you would like to help support the show, you can join at seriachronicles.com/Patreon or click the Chronicles Tifosi button on our website. You can also help keep us going by giving us a one-time tip on Ko-fi. Just click the button on the website at seriachronicles.com. One more thing you can do to support us at the moment is to follow our Amazon link for our sponsorship that we have with Amazon. And to do that, just go to getamazonmusic.com/Serie A Chronicles. We'll have all of these links in the show notes as well.
As you all know, Roma played out a fantastic match against Venezia, which we will try to talk about later, while Juventus will take on Lazio tonight. But another very interesting game that did happen was obviously Napoli hosting Genoa. There was so much interest in this game because Genoa were playing for their lives, while this was the last home game for Lorenzo Insigne, a child of Napoli, their captain and a player who has been remarkably important for the team, for the squad, for the city. He has been a divisive figure, both in Naples and, of course, on this podcast. And he is a remarkable player. I don't think anyone can deny the actual technique of the player and how much he has given to the club that he is so madly obsessed and madly in love with. I guess in many ways, because Napoli have always come so close but never gone over the line, he's received a lot of criticism for that, for not perhaps being the leader that they wanted or needed at the club to ensure the points and to ensure the right mentality at the right moments throughout the season. And I think that's been his greatest criticism that's been aimed at him. He's also been a player who sometimes is engaged in sort of frivolous and petulant behavior on the sidelines, whether it's against a particular coach or being taken off or whatever it is. But others have also realized that the pressure has been enormous on him. A lot perhaps was asked of him, and perhaps too much at times when it wasn't fair, because there were obviously other people and other factors to consider, including the president, including the coaching. So we don't know. We don't know where he stands, I guess. But what it is that there was a remarkable banner that was hung from the
Curva
B. And that said that they love him, they understand him. I don't actually have the message to date. It is on my Twitter. It was on my Twitter, but it was one in which everyone did come together and unite in reminding Lorenzo Insigne that he is a proud child of the city, and they are very thankful to him for his flair and integrity in the game. And everyone came on the pitch holding, Aurelio De Laurentiis was holding his hand. We know there's been ups and downs in that relationship, but I think that one thing we can all agree on is Lorenzo Insigne will be missed.
Yeah, the one person who didn't get a warm reception, De Laurentiis, who I think was booed. It was, it was a sad thing, and it always is sad to see someone who's been so closely associated to one club make that move on. I have loved watching Lorenzo Insigne at Napoli. I think at times he's been a wonderful, mesmerizing player. I think his combinations under Sarri, particularly with Callejon, that sort of iconic ball to the back post for Callejon to score at the back post, and then of course the tiragir, the curling shot. He has his trademarks. He's left a mark that won't be forgotten in Serie A. And I think he was very sort of open and emotional about how he was feeling, and I think the way he sort of talked about it as being like a family feels true to it. And I think it probably is true to the experience of being a boy from Naples who goes and plays for the one big club in Naples. And I mean, there are other clubs, but this is Napoli, it's Naples, it's literally the one. And that sort of coming with its, as he's described it, with its ups and downs and with its arguments, but in the end, this sort of underpinning of affection and connection. And I think that you could see how much it's gonna sort of take for him to adjust to life without it, but that was his decision, and maybe it's the right one for everyone involved to move on. The sort of the farewell was exactly as grandiose as you would imagine it to be at a club run by De Laurentiis. He was given not only a replica shirt, not only a sort of interactive like video display with like best moments from time at Napoli, but also a trophy that, as lots of people noticed on socials, was literally as big as him. And I suppose if you wanted to be cynical about it, he was also given a chance to retake a penalty to make sure he got a goal as well.
Yeah, that was an interesting one because, of course, this match mattered. I mean, I know it looked like sort of a celebration of Lorenzo Insigne, but on the other hand, the opponent is fighting to save their lives in Genoa, of course, another historical club, the oldest club in Serie A, in fact. And they needed anything out of this game to try to, I mean, they needed a win, really. And yeah, it was interesting that the penalty was retaken. But of course, Genoa, after 15 years? How long has it been? They are now mathematically relegated alongside Venezia. And this has been a really tough season. I think Scudetto is still thinking about the penalty against Sampdoria. They were never going to be good enough in this match. You know, actually, when we're going back to Inter, when they said that, like, Lautaro Martinez said that Bologna is the match that he'd replay, I'm interested to see that no one mentioned Genoa, because that's the one I would have redone if I was wanting the trophy. Because I think that's where they ended up dropping points in the 0-0.
Or even the derby when they outplayed Milan. They outplayed Milan in the derby and then let Giroud hit them twice. You know, that switched that game around and the title race is done. So there's plenty of moments that Inter could have turned this the other way, but that's the story of a title race, isn't it? They go twists and turns.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think will happen with Genoa now? Do you think that they will be back up next season? Do you think this was inevitable?
It's funny, isn't it, that it happens in the year when Preziosi finally goes. Like, for so long, the fans have been sort of against Preziosi there, have wanted him to get out of the way and let the club be run in what they would consider like a more professional and sort of serious way, I suppose, than his sort of constant, like, I'm going to fire a manager every 5 minutes approach. And since he's gone, the new ownership have come in and they've changed managers and they've got relegated. So, you know, I can see a certain amount of sort of poetic absurdity in the way it's all played out, but certainly you would expect, given the investment that's been made already to buy the club, it would be pretty shocking if there's not serious sort of planning being made right away for the club to try and come back up at the first attempt. And structurally, Genoa are big enough, rich enough that Serie B should be navigable for them. But you know, that's not how football works either. You've got to get it right. You've got to make the right decisions, and it's going to be difficult because what's left behind is a whole sort of empire built by Preziosi and a whole way of doing things. And that involved owning a lot of players and moving them out on loans and doing things in a particular way. And you've either got to sort of go with that and make it work for yourself, or you've got to unpick the whole thing. And that's a big job as well. So who knows? If you're asking me for my best hunch, I think Genoa will probably bounce back. But there is a lot of work to be done. And of course, the big decision about whether or not it's Alexander Blessin who stays on to do it.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the most interesting thing is who's going to, I mean, if he's going to stay on and if they're going to go and try to satisfy whatever it is he needs and how much money will be spent. But a lot of money was spent on Genoa. Another team that was mathematically relegated was indeed Venezia, who have been somewhat of a fairy tale, really. They are a side that had tried to take a different approach to marketing and succeeded on that level. Their jersey became one of the most famous jerseys in football, where everyone was dying for, and they were selling out constantly. It's a team that is made up of so many different internationals, but it is still managed to retain that family feel about it. We've had Gianluca Buzio on the pod to discuss everything with us and how he feels when it comes to being part of this historic club that obviously has such a beautiful stadium, Stadio Penzo. But they played a remarkable game against Roma, in which Roma had 46 shots. So still early ended in 1-1. But it was Venezia that opened the scoring, and they've had problems this season. Obviously, we've seen Paolo Zanetti hacked, and that had to do with just a way of trying to reinvigorate the squad. But they have somewhat improved, and we obviously can see that with the 1-1 with Roma. But you imagine Roma do have their thoughts on the Conference League.
Yeah, well, the best solution to anything that's happening in this last little bit of the Serie A season where Roma have slipped away and they haven't got, unless Lazio slip up, we're recording on Sunday and Lazio playing Juventus tonight, so Lazio could have even sewn up 5th place by the time you're listening to this. But the best way...
Are you just imagining they're going to defeat Juventus?
I'm not saying they will. I'm just saying it's possible. Like, I don't want to sort of record this and then we look silly afterwards. Well, I'm sure I've managed to do that anyway this episode with my sick dog and all the other nonsense.
Oh, no.
But look, the best ending to this season for Roma involves winning the Conference League. We've talked about how they've sort of bought all into that. And I think it's pretty clear that that's where all energies are at the moment. And having said that, look, when you take 46 shots to your opponent's 4, normally you win, right? Like, you just do. So sometimes games are just...
Especially when the opponent's down to 10 men. Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes games are just weird.
They are. Sometimes they're just weird. But we do wish you luck, Roma, because, I mean, how glorious would it be if you are to win the inaugural Conference League trophy, and then you can bring home a European trophy back to Italy.
Our producer Simon wants me to mention 4 crossbars in this game. I think that's very important to clarify how unlucky Roma were. I think that's about all we've got time for today. Sorry, it's been a slightly chaotic one, Mina and Simon, with my dog. One thing we haven't really got to, relegation fight, also still very much going down to the wire. Salernitana drew with Empoli on Saturday, and Cagliari, despite losing to Inter, are still alive. So going into the final weekend, Genoa, as mentioned, relegated, but Cagliari are 2 points behind Salernitana. They also hold the tiebreaker over Salernitana. So if they can win away to Venezia and Salernitana do not win at home to Udinese, then Cagliari can still get themselves out of the drop zone.
Tell us who you want to get relegated. I know I want Salernitana to survive just because it's such a nice story.
Oh, it's hard not to root for Davide and Nicola. But
I know, it is.
It's also hard not to think, you know what, Sardinia is a nice place to go on a work trip.
Sardinia is stunning.
I'm not picking sides. They're both whoever manages at the end will deserve it. That is all we've got time for, as I said. Please do, if you are so inclined, get yourself on over to that Amazon link, get amazonmusic.com/Serie A Chronicles. Helps us out a bunch. Free trial, doesn't cost you a thing, and you can cancel it whenever you like.
Music for free for a month. Do it.
Right. Join our Patreon Chronicles Tifosi to get loads of bonus episodes, support the podcast, and help us keep producing it. You can leave us a one-time tip via Ko-fi. Links to both of those on our website at serieachronicles.com. Find us on Twitter at Mina Rizuki, at Nikki Bandini, and follow Serie A Chronicles on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. That's all from us for now. We'll see you next week. Oh, it's not live. We'll see you with some Patreon minisodes in the meantime, but we'll see everyone next week. All right, guys. Bye.
Ciao.
La da lunga su Leao contro Miners, Leao, gol! Ha segnato Leao, urla San Siro, vibra San Siro, Leao, ancora Rafa, Leao, sentite come urla San Siro, tanta roba rade, ecco Teo Hernandez che viene in mezzo al campo, c'è libero Messias, Teo va da solo, Teo, gol! Ancora Teo, è una meraviglia, il gol di Teo Hernandez, da un'area all'altra, è una meraviglia, senti il mio cuore, è il cuore del Milan, noi battiamo forte, Teo Hernandez, i milanisti belli come il sole, 2-0 per noi, siete belli, siete meravigliosi, avete indosso i colori più belli del mondo, guardo i milanisti, sono pieno di gioia, il Milan, sono pieno di voi ragazzi, sono pieno di voi. È finita! 2-0 per noi, 2-0 per noi, 2-0 per noi, 2-0 per noi.
Sports Social Podcast Network. Judy was boring.
Hello.
Then Judy discovered ChumbaCasino.com.
It's my little escape.
Now Judy's the life of the party.
Oh, baby, mama's bringing home the bacon.
Whoa, take it easy, Judy. The Chumba life is for everybody. So go to ChumbaCasino.com and play over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.